I think we're back and we're really excited to have with us Ryan Knapp with Intelligent Transportation Systems at the Agency of Transportation to talk about online truck permitting. So thank you for being here today, sir.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me. So I'm just here to provide some high-level updates about our effort to modernize the DMV's commercial vehicle operations system. As you may be aware, that this project was underway a couple of years ago, and due to irreconcilable differences between the state of Vermont and the vendor that was selected, the project was halted to reevaluate, and ultimately the contract was terminated. And we took a significant pause to reevaluate all of our functional requirements, our project team, our processes, defined roles. The list goes on to make sure that the trucking community and the commercial vehicle operations unit had a product that would serve its purpose.
Oh, that's desirable.
Yes, yeah. So it's one way to state the obvious, but it became clear over time that we needed to hit the pause button and reevaluate the strategy, the finances, the budget required to get the product that was required. So we reset, and we currently we have we put out an RFI about a year ago. And geared that more towards a commercial off-the-shelf solution, which should set us on a path of greater success here moving forward. Coincidentally, the RFP responses are due today, so we're excited to get those back and begin evaluating those. We're certainly going to take our time and make sure we make a well-informed decision. As you can see, the timeline here, has us awarding the contract in early spring, and ultimately getting going on that, early summer, midsummer, is our goal. The goals of the platform is to make it accessible 24/7, automatically approving certain permit requests and applications that don't require human input, but historically, that's the way that the business has been done. So this should greatly improve the customer experience. You no longer have to wait for the DMV to be open to have your permit processed. And
some companies can be in a very different time zone, 2 or 3 hours from the West Coast company.
Absolutely. And the scale, the spectrum is vast. You have your a core group of the trucking community that processes or applies for many permits that we're very excited about, just being able to turn these over much more quickly. Having a system that remembers your old permits. Don't have to submit, an application from bare bones every single time. And then also this assistance with mapping out an acceptable route based on the information that's available to V-Trans and the DMV should streamline the process, because right now it's sort of manually determining a route based on our restrictions that we work for extremely large or heavy payload. So the system is going to spit out a recommended route that should get us much farther down the road, no pun intended there, in terms of processing these and just making a better user experience.
Really quick, I recall conversations on Woodstock about locally municipally issued permits. Is that still happening across the state? And will this system integrate that? And that's the primary objective of allowing those municipally issued permits to be online.
Yes, absolutely. The system will allow for municipal access. We're viewing this as sort of build it and they will come approach. We know there's a lot of some pain points with municipalities. There's a needle to thread there in terms of liability and jurisdiction, depending on the class of the roadway and the origin of the destinations of these payloads. We intend and attempt to use state routes wherever possible, but ultimately to get to where you're going or to leave where you're coming from very well could involve municipal routes and routes that have different restrictions than our state routes. So we aim to give the power to municipalities to process their permits the way they want to.
How many of these permits do you issue a year?
About 25,000. Multiple different permit types, but over the last 3 years, we've averaged about 25,000.
Because these are just like it's kind of like they're regularly overweight. They're not excessively overweight.
They're like people like I have one people that I met with and I'm very glad to hear this, very absolutely positively thrilled to hear this. Met with a crane business, and they were like, okay, they were trying to get the permit, and they had to go. They had to go through a process and had to actually talk with somebody. And I think, Mike, I talked to you at one point in time about this. But they're going to go on Tuesday, but then all of a sudden the Raptors didn't come, so now they got to go on Wednesday. And then so the permit they had no longer is there, or with the amount of roadways that we've had, a storm comes through and all of a sudden the bridge gets posted a little bit different. And so, it just basically kills that opportunity for that job. And not to say that this is a cure-all for everything, but to hear that you're getting past the manual process into an automated process, especially for these ones, as you've said, that are concurrent permits that, they're pretty familiar with what they're doing. They're not doing anything that's brand new, is very, very refreshing, and very, very excited to hear this. This is, a half a dozen people that I'm going to make phone calls today and let them know that this is something that's starting to be implemented, and thank you.
What is overweight? 75?
That's a loaded question.
Depends. I bet. It depends on
your
the road.
axles, yeah, it depends on your.
And whether you're a milk truck and.
True, so to back to your previous question, this system will encompass all of the oversized overweight permits, with a different degree of human interaction depending on the permit type. Some of these, again, it's an annual process for these trucking companies. It's rinse repeat. So those ones, the goal is that those are when you plug in your values, or maybe you pull from historical information from the year past, get your permit just like that, because it's more of a, it's a known commodity. Whereas some of these larger loads, we call them super loads.
Right.
If you are aware of the 1 million pound payload that came down from Milton to Websterville this summer, that's all hands on deck. We want to make sure we get that one right. The system's not going to give us all the answers for something like that.
And what the system that my municipality, or a couple of my municipalities have problems with, is the posting of road system for mud season, basically. And is this incorporated into that? Because they say that system is another antiquated system that DMV has, where you can't pull data from last year and you gotta hand enter it. And this doesn't relate to that, I'm assuming.
So I can't speak specifically to that given my role as a business lead for this project. However, I can say that in terms of the restrictions that the system can evaluate, that will rely heavily on the data that can be provided. So I'm
By the municipality.
That's the problem, because they have to provide it, they have to hand enter it into a system that they say is antiquated. They feel like they're back in high school entering onto. Yeah, well, exactly. But we're modernizing all these other systems. Are we modernizing that system where they're required to post what roads they're posting in their town for mud season, but they have to enter it on the statewide website, which we don't know if anybody looks at.
That's not a part of the e-permitting RFP, but we'll go back and explore that. So Mike's very familiar with the database that you're talking about, and let's put it on the list and put some thought into if maybe there's something else.
These fees, there's a fee for this.
for acquiring a permit.
Yeah. And that was part of the whole fee increase last year.
On the municipal side, I remember discussions, and we had testimony where municipalities would have different speed limits and weight limits, and is that back to this system? In other words, sometimes trucking companies wouldn't know that. I can't remember what town. I think you were testifying to that, and then they would get very surprised, but they couldn't turn around, or the deliveries. I don't remember if it was oil trucks or whatever. So, is that the same database that would get that information that truckers would be able to access to say if you're in the town of Springfield? These are roads that
So this,
have a special weight limit, or I can't remember exactly all.
when we started the e-permitting discussion, I think 3 years ago, maybe it was more, you know, your goal, you asked us to find a solution that would allow municipalities who have control of that to come in so the businesses can do one-stop shopping.
Right.
What Ryan is talking about is we built into this ask in the RFP is the opportunity for municipalities to join and manage their permit through this system. We cannot mandate it. We cannot control their costs. And what's happening, and I'm speaking for the industry, and I know that you can, municipalities are open less than DMV. And so accessibility to get their permits is really one of their biggest struggles. So
But someone, an entity, business needing a permit,
has to go to the local.
then they would have to go to each individual town. In other words, the database would, pull up the town, so you might be traveling through and
If they choose to participate in the new system, then it will.
it will, okay.
But currently, go ahead. I mean, I know this is passionate for your group.
And for Bill's group, but Matt Coder, just speaking on behalf of the fuel truck industry. Yeah, we would love the DMV to run it all and not have to knock on the clerk's door at Plainfield and pay them $5 and get a piece of paper that somehow protects us from driving an oil truck in the middle of winter on a town road.
And I'd
I
say,
love that, but that's not what we have.
as far as being in the system of that, on the select board and getting those $5 payments, we had no clue about any of that stuff. So to bring it to, something on a website like that, would certainly get a lot of the towns out of the middle of that as well.
They want the money, don't they?
They do, I mean, I think they can get the money still, right? Or would they still be able, they would get access to the money?
Yes.
Bill is here to fact check me, but we've had the discussion about 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't think the $5 is what was driving the conversation. It was the ability to control.
Yeah.
For instance, if an industry is rolling through town, they want to have some sort of oversight over that, an enforcement mechanism. The $5, in fact, I think it's cost them more to collect the $5 than it does to do it. From our perspective, from those that need to be in these towns on town roads delivering goods and services with overweight vehicles, we just want a simple way to ensure that we don't get fined.
And I know at the town's level, it was an accountability as far as if they even, because it doesn't absolve the companies, your companies, from if they did do damage to the road, who was responsible of it. I mean, at least you have an accounting of it in somewhere that, hey, we know you guys are there because, you got a permit here. And I just think it puts it all in one central place, so where people can be better aware of who's on those roads when they're posted.
Question to Mr. Kodak, I just heard the commissioner say we can't mandate it, but 3 or 4 years ago, how does that, did we try to mandate it and was there backlash from the communities?
There was concern from the, if I remember correctly, yes, that if we were gonna mandate that every community that issued permits had to use this system. So we engaged in several outreaches and we could not come to consensus. So we made the business decision, and there have been some discussions. We're asking in this bid that the opportunity exists for, I'd love some communities to pilot it, but for the opportunity would exist to come in. And that's how we've established it. Our neighboring states, all of them use the system and are very similar, and it's successful. Or these systems. There's only a few out there that are COTS-based.
2 follow-up questions. So do you see anything about this system that is going to change the conversation from 3 or 4 years ago? That it would be more attractive for them to want to do it? And do you see an incentive, so a carrot to try to get municipalities to want to opt in?
So I think once we have it out there and we'll talk about it, but doing an outreach. So Mike and I have had meetings with some communities that had a different opinion of the general I think the league was more concerned that we were gonna control cost, mandate, and what the parameters were, and require everyone to do it. We did have some communities that have an interest. It's costing them more to have a staff person, administrative assistant, the town manager process a $10 permit. And the permit, the fine doesn't necessarily fix the road. It's a fine for violation of the permit. So it is a business opportunity for them. I hope we're gonna wait for the bid, and then we're gonna talk about, maybe reach back out to, a couple of the community members that said, do you wanna pilot this? Let's get some municipalities in there using it so businesses can be successful.
One more. Would it be premature, do you think, for this committee to invite the VLCT in to talk about this, or should we let the system come online and then maybe next session have that conversation?
I think we need to I would ask that you allow us to go through the process, because right now, we have a budget, and I'm not sure if Brian's talked about it, if the bids come in 100% over what we have already appropriated, we've got to reset, we need to have conversations with you. So I think we really should see where the bids take us and make sure the element that we've asked for, which is what one of the pieces, the connectivity to municipalities, is in there, and it meets our specs, right?
I just ask that when you go through that process, just think about the mud season road. If there's a way to incorporate that in there so that it's an easy way for the towns to upload the data, because my understanding is it's basically the same roads every year.
Except 2 years ago of the mud season from hell.
I think it started in July this year.
Yeah.
But season December.
Can I? On behalf of the fuel truck drivers. It's also a distinction that is often lost on my people as well as the town managers, which is there's the mud season permits and the roads that are restricted because of mud seasons. And then there are the roads that have restrictions all 365, you have to have a permit. So you might be driving an oil truck in July, if you're still restricted on that road, you must have that $5 permit per truck or $10 permit per fleet.
Yeah.
Which is different than mud season. Mud season is the town foreman says, this road is undrivable for all those oil trucks, stay off. And we get a notice and says, stay off the roads, and if we get caught, we get fined.
Do you get a notice? Where do you get a notice?
So there is a system of notifying, but it's online, right? So the foreman has to put it on the website, and then the fuel company has to, or the trucking company.
You don't get a notice, you just have to, you have to.
Get a page or a text or anything like that.
Right.
It's online, but it's very laborious. And sometimes we just
Not
see,
functional.
sometimes it's much easier to see the sign on the road that's just posted. So trucks don't drive it.
Because I think they're posted, at least in my experience, and there's probably some changes, but basically every year they post the same sections of the percent. So it should be pretty easy. And one town clerk said that you think you could just say like, yeah, we're doing the same as last year, but they can't. They have to enter in the same data like this. They have to re-enter it every year.
Which is different than town roads, like down Shelburne. I drive through Shelburne from my home in South Burlington, I get to Montpelier, and the road I drive on, Shelburne Road, says no trucks over 26,000 pounds. Well, that's an oil truck full is 40, 50,000 pounds. So every oil truck driving on the road has to have that $5 permit or $10 per fleet.
I just want, I'm hoping that the mud season can be incorporated into the system.
I agree.
Go.
Oh, so thanks. So, Bill Smith from Vermont Truck and Bus Association. Hi again, folks. So kind of just echoing what Matt was saying, I think that the key interest that my members see that the towns want is insurance information when it comes to that year-round overweight permit that they issue for $5 or $10. So they want to know you have insurance. Well, everyone's insured now. The state requires it for registration and other things. So, let's make sure folks are insured, but maybe we could look at that a different way as this program comes out and say, do you have your insurance? Okay, well then the towns, the other thing is they want to know who's on the roads. They should be here for the conversation at some point when you get to it, absolutely.
Even out-of-state truckers, they have insurance requirements as well?
Yeah, they do.
So for example, the propane truck, that was Irisburg. That would have been, so that insurance would be available to help underwrite the cost of the
Absolutely.
bridge damage.
But that wasn't a fault of the bridge, right? That was just the truck slid off.
Yeah.
Yes,
Weather,
so,
very
yeah,
slippery
yeah,
weather.
absolutely.
No, but when we were talking about insurance, because obviously that.
It would be good if the town could just look, is this company insured on the website, or instead of getting a COI for each company.
Is that on the web, insurance data? Or it's just a requirement? I mean, I don't know.
The town.
It's a requirement of municipal, to get the municipal permit, you have to provide your insurance information.
But there's no data system.
Yeah, there's no.
You have to supply it to each town.
Yes.
Yeah.
With each paper permit, a paper copy of your insurance declarations page and your $10 check.
It is safe to assume you're engaging with the VLCT on some of the things they want to see for this municipal opt-in and the characteristics like the certificate of insurance.
So Ryan, I'll let Ryan, I think we had one meeting or one engagement with them. I'll just say as business, as AOT, Highways and DMV said, we know the desire of the legislature, we know the desire of the businesses. We're going to include it and allow for them to come in, which would mean, I think that's what, right, you know.
You'll have the functionality, but whether they utilize it's gonna be here.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I also think until we see the RFP responses, read the details and better understand what the capabilities are of these commercial off-the-shelf solutions, because they come with caveats of, you know, this is what's out of the box, and then you have customization, which is money and something that they don't do right now. And then you have configuration, which is just them making tweaks in their system to meet your needs. So we need to better understand what's out of the box in terms of what the towns, the functionality that's available to the towns and the municipalities within the system as it currently sits. And then I can certainly see enhancements over time, because, and you can probably empathize with, you know, building a system that's going to make 200 plus towns happy is never going to happen. We want to first and foremost make sure that it can serve the purpose of the CVO unit, the commercial vehicle operations unit, and the trucking community at large, and bring the municipalities along with us. And again, if it may make changes over time to better suit them, I can see that happening for sure.
It'd help me in understanding this conversation going forward, how we compare to other states with regards to these municipal permits, if we're out of step, or if there's common other states that have gone the way of allowing for a more centralized issuance of this thing, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, it is. And we've had this discussion in this committee many times. Many states don't have the local control of permits that Vermont offers. And I think that's something that you all have to address.
Right up there.
Including our other neighboring New Englands.
Yeah, that if they do, because I feel like, and I could be wrong, I feel like Maine there's certain elements of Maine where they do, but they have to use the system. And I could be wrong with that state.
Well, you triggered our memory of prior discussions. Are there, it just raises the question, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago? Mud season was absolutely horrendous. Roads were just sections fell apart. And there would be times when in fact you couldn't even put an oil truck over those roads. So somebody could be out of fuel and, well, I guess they'd get their 2-gallon can of diesel and go for a couple, but the roads were in some places impassable. Or no one could use them.
Last year?
Was it last year or
Was it?
year before?
I feel like it's been going on for a long time.
No, but there was,
Right, we have.
2 years
That
ago,
road from
it was like a mud season that we had not
Plainfield, like
experienced for
positive
years.
pi, and that road that goes up over the hill.
People actually
That
were
was
walking
like,
to their houses.
we had that person that got stuck overnight.
Oh, yeah, the woman, on, BPR, yeah. She almost died. Linda Radke.
Or you want to-
Yeah.
We do have two more people on the agenda for today. Should we segue topics?
Oh, yeah, we should, because we're getting off topic.
Thank you very much, Ryan. That was great. More conversation more in the future.
News already sent to 4 people. Perfect, thank you.
I see next that we have Costa Pappas and Bradley Kuchenberger to discuss the update on Vermont V-Trans, federal grants and
Oh,
IUA.
there he is.
Did you want to come up to the table here, Bradley?
I got Costa's online.
I am honestly going to let Costa take the lead as he has the most informative response related to our grants. And items related to the funding of those grants, which I'm sure that you're all interested in because we've had those conversations the last couple of years. We can get into following the governor's budget address.
Costa, you have the floor if you like.
Good morning, Senators, and thank you for the record. My name is Costa Pappas with the Agency of Transportation. So this morning, I'd like to provide you an overview of the DOT discretionary grants, kind of a history of what the IIJA included, and also talk about some of the grants that we've received and our focus area for these grant applications. Just to be sure, does everyone have a copy of the handout, which is an itemized list of the grants? Okay, great. So let's rewind a little bit and go back to 2008 during the era of the Great Recession. That was really the starting point for discretionary grant programs. You may remember the Great Recession. There was a lot of stimulus dollars back then that came to us primarily through supplemental federal formula funds for highways. The idea was simple. Unemployment was rising, and to kind of stem the tide and get us back on track economically, the federal government made a lot of funding available to states for highway work that occurred pretty rapidly. Along with that, they also created a number of discretionary grant programs. The largest one at the time was the high-speed rail program, but there was also Tiger grants, and there was some Federal Transit Administration grants, but they were very limited. It was really a handful back then. And what happened was after the 2008 recession era, the supplemental highway funding went away, but those handful of grant programs stayed behind or stayed with us for the better part of a decade. Fast forward to the IIJA in 2020, 2021, and what we ended up with was a record number of new discretionary grant programs, about 24 in all, most of which were brand new and had no precedent. And virtually all of them were funded through the general fund and through what's called advanced appropriation. So a few years ago, the appropriators actually appropriated funding for these grant programs for their 5-year life cycle. So a lot of money, they totaled about $100 billion, but they all came with their own kind of caveats and restrictions that we found out about kind of later as the federal government released our funding notice. On that spreadsheet that I sent you, what you'll notice is going back to 2018, about $415 million has been awarded to Vermont. 369 million of that occurred since the passage of the IIJA, to illustrate the point of the impact of what all these new grant programs can have on a funding scale. The vast majority of these grant dollars have come in recently just because there's more grant programs out there. So in terms of how these grants—
Can we jump in?
Absolutely, Senator.
So why does it go back to 2018? Is this a list of grants that are still active, or did you just pick that because some of these are 5-year grants?
Yeah, I picked the 5-year period just because it's clean timeline-wise, and it also points the fact that we were active with discretionary grants even prior to the IIJA, but that accelerated with the infusion of new money into the federal bill.
And so I'm assuming some of these projects are complete, or many of them.
No, they're not complete. The rail project is still ongoing, and some of the vehicle purchases have occurred for the most part, and then the aviation projects dating back to 2018 have been completed. So most of the list going back to 2018 has been completed. The one that's kind of pending is the rail project, because that was a multiple phase project. So the bridges south of Rutland to Hoosick, New York is an ongoing. The rest of them are essentially completed.
Costa, can I ask you a question about one specific one, fully expecting you to maybe tell me who to ask as a follow-up? The 2022 RAISE grant for $224.8 million with a $3.1 million local match for the Winooski Bridge. I just my inbox of the Winooski mayor making a very, very salient point that Winooski, on one side of the Winooski River, has about 9,000 people in it, and Burlington on the other side has about 45,000 people in it. Yet they're both expected to spend half of the local match. And it just seems disproportionate and I was told yesterday that it might have to do with federal requirements on that local match. So I'm welcoming of any advice or guidance as to how that formula might be otherwise reconsidered, just to help inform a discussion with the mayors and communities adjacent to my district.
Yeah, I'll defer that one, Senator, to Bradley, or maybe we need to defer that one to the Highway Division for how those splits occur when it comes to local match.
Thank you.
I'll take that question back and get back to you, please.
Can I ask, since we're asking about specific ones, so like in 2018, there's an electric transit vehicles, specifically says Montpelier, but I don't remember ever seeing any electric transit vehicles traveling around Montpelier, so.
2018.
The fourth one down from the top, 407,000.
18 passenger, all electric transit vehicles.
Yeah, and also doing electric vehicle supply equipment for them.
Yeah, we'll get back to you after consulting the transit group on that one.
Okay, that's just what I was wondering, if this list was, which ones are complete or which ones aren't, or maybe were changed.
Any more questions?
I don't see any in the room.
Okay.
Well, we have this list, and then we, of course, have the transportation plan. So everything here on this list, these projects would be reflected in the plans that we have reviewed and approved for since 2018 on. I'm assuming this is just a kind of a subset of all the.
That's correct. So these projects are either subset of items that are already within the capital program that have been approved, or potentially the new capital program that you will review soon.
Did we ask for this?
That specifically? Yeah, yes, you did.
Of all federal grants?
Maybe not specifically. I think it was our interpretation of information that you were seeking to receive.
Probably the House asked for.
We did have a discussion with them yesterday, correct?
Did they have more probing questions than we have right now?
I don't think so. It was pretty similar.
They probably went line by line. We obviously are not doing that.
They're coming back next week too.
Yeah.
So I think to Senator Kitchell's point, we'll see this in the transportation plan as we go deeper into those documents.
Yeah.
Well, except for the projects that are over and completed, like some of the 2018, except for the build, which was huge, 20 million.
I will ask, because there are so many that are, 2018 and on and kind of carrying on, or Senator Perchlik was, these are all active, these are all still going. these are all moving forward, nothing we can scrub out of there and reallocate someplace else.
Well, I think the point is that the funding has already been allocated to those projects, both the grant funds and the whatever state or local match is associated with them. So I can delete the 2018 projects. The point was to kind of highlight what we did even prior to the IIJA. The idea being that this isn't a new endeavor for us. We've been applying for grants for the better part of 15 years across all the modes.
And airport and rail improvement have always been reliant on federal grants. And so long before the IIJA money came in. So this is not, I guess what I'm saying is reaffirming your comment that this isn't something new. It's something that actually we've relied on these grant funding sources as the major avenue of funding for rail and airport improvement.
That's correct, Senator. There's very little to no money for aviation or rail that comes to us by formula. So they're almost entirely dependent on federal grants, and the state budget part of that really goes to draw down federal funds. And to some extent, even the transit program is dependent on federal grants for new facilities, for new vehicles. The transition to electric buses, highly dependent on federal grants to get us to that goal.
Question related to that will come up on a bill that I'm co-sponsoring that should be out soon. It has to do with, I see a lot of monies here going to Amtrak station rehabilitations as well as the tracks themselves. But I have constituents that are making a reasonable case that when they take the Greyhound or they take other bus services, there right now is no place for them to wait outside of the elements, and they're asked to sit on the sidewalks for 45 minutes or so, when there's a perfectly good one Main Street in Burlington, which gets a lot of federals and state dollars to upgrade it, as well as the Green Mountain Transit spaces. So one question I'm going to have on these grants, is there anything in here that would preclude or otherwise maybe motivate the opening of publicly funded waiting spaces that we use for transportation services to be accessible to private operators that are achieving some of our climate goals through shared public transit or shared.
Right now, Greyhound can't pull up to the,
right.
Could be scheduled.
And I know there's lots of different actors in this piece, but one conversation I want to have is how could they use one Main Street or GMT bus terminal in a way that doesn't step on toes, but still allows for people taking buses outside of the state, to stay wait convenient spaces out of the elements.
Right. And maybe they could even charge them for that.
That's probably where they aren't doing it now. So,
but it could be a federal rule that they
Yeah.
can't. Kind of like we can't sell things at the highway rest areas. Yeah.
that's what I want to understand more. If we can't charge for it, can we mandate that they allow for it during normal operating hours if they already receive monies from us?
Yeah. Is that different than Senator Harrison's bill about?
That's the bill.
Okay.
Anything else on this?
Good. Although I don't know what IUA stands for.
I'm sorry, what?
IUA.
I do have a couple more notes.
Okay. Can you also tell me what IUA stands for?
I think that may have been a typo for IIJA. You're looking at the agenda for this morning.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I assumed.
Yeah, so the IIJA, not the IUA.
Okay.
So really quickly, just to kind of emphasize that the 24 or so grant programs do encompass all the modes, but have very specific requirements that are embedded either in the law itself or kind of policy priorities of the Department of Transportation that have been embedded in them. Some of these grant programs, the state is not eligible for, either deliberately or by the way that they're set up. So for example, there's grant programs in there for mega projects. These are the $100 million plus projects that we don't have a lot of those laying around. There's a culverts program that's focused on ocean fish passage that clearly we're not eligible for. And then, of course, there's a lot of funding in the IIJA for the Northeast Rail Corridor that has very specific requirements, that we would not be able to tap into. So, the 24 programs, $100 billion start shrinking when you start looking at the specifics of all the different grant programs. The match requirements also differ. Some programs don't require matching funds, others have a 20% match. Others are more flexible and they'll allow you to go up to 90% federal if you use other federal funds. So they're kind of all over the board in terms of what the matching funds required. But the one thing that's constant is they're highly competitive. Excuse me. So based on data that I've seen on the DOT website for some of these programs where they release lists of all the applicants and then all the awardees, some of them fund 5% or less of the grant applications that come in. So think about a rejection rate that's 95%. This is the level of competitiveness we're talking about. So although there's more funding and there's more programs, it's likely that they've gotten more competitive over the past few years, because that's a pretty high rejection rate. So the message, I think, to applicants, regardless of who they are, is patience and perseverance, because nobody's going to be batting 500 on a recurring basis applying for these grant programs.
So as I look, none of these are IIJA, under the IIJA program.
They are, Senator, with the exception of what's titled congressional spending, which are
So for example, so it doesn't say it then. So like in 2022, annual rail appropriation, is that an IIJA grant?
Yes.
It is?
Yes. So what happened there, and we were actually very fortunate on that one.
Which ones are IIJA then?
Yeah, so the IIJA did a couple of things with rail. The first thing is we were all states that operated passenger rail services through Amtrak were under a federal mandate to replace the rail cars. They're very old, and it became a requirement that they be replaced. And initially, it was only the national system routes that were going to get IIJA funding to replace the rail cars. The state-supported services like ours were not. So the states that provided these services pushed very hard to be included in this, because that would have been a $114 million state fund charge to the state. We would have to pay for those using non-federal funds. That would have been very pricey. The other thing that the IIJA did, it also included some language that dovetailed with other authorizing and appropriations language related to positive train control requirements. Those are the safety enhancements to rail systems. So what it did is it supported in the investments that you're seeing under those safety line items. So although that funding comes out of annual appropriations, it's rooted in the IIJA and related legislation that allowed those funds to become available to us. Again, that's another example of where we would have to spend state funds undertaking work or applying for more federal grants on a smaller scale and take a decade or longer to get to the same goal. So apart from the earmarks, everything on that list is related to the IIJA.
Well, not everything, because some of them
Or prior. Yeah.
So I guess that was what I'm trying to figure out is we thought that federal legislation would bring additional revenues and resources to the state. And it's very hard to figure out from here what was that, gain, of resources under that bill? And I guess it's hard because what you're saying is some of what would have been granted otherwise somehow got brought in and made part of the IIJA. So it's hard to say how much net did we gain from that, what was viewed as a significant a piece of federal funding to benefit the states. And I guess I don't have a clue in terms of what that net gain was, how many millions of dollars, or do we know that? It's just not presented in that way.
Yeah,
I think we would be able to present that information.
You offered that stat at the beginning, something about how this represents 469 million this
Right.
year, whereas prior to the IIJA, it was only like 128 million.
Yeah, so I think, Costa, you discussed yesterday when we were with House Transportation, I think you can look at it either through the amount of applications and awards that we've received in this current surface transportation bill, and also the dollar figures that Costa mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, which, approximately 80% of the dollars shown on this list or more are specifically related to the IIJA. And to Senator, your point, some of those programs were not new. Some were expanded, but many were new. And I think that drove the amount of applications that we were able to review and process, and the amount of projects we were able to kind of cull from our capital program through our own internal review process to apply for these grants.
IIJA funds started coming in what fiscal year?
I believe 21.
21, okay. It's just hard to remember.
Yeah, and the years are all confusing as well, but on this list of 21.
Yeah, Senator, you make a good point in that a lot of this is entangled. So one of the things the IIJA did was vastly upsize the amount of funding to these individual programs. So for example, the Airport Improvement Program, they effectively doubled the appropriation for that program. And, would we have gotten less had they not doubled the appropriation, or would we have gotten a $22 million electric bus grant from the FTA had they not vastly increased that appropriation? It becomes very difficult to kind of parcel out increments for that reason. And so there's no real good answer to that question. It's a bunch of what if scenarios just because of the way that they structured this, right?
Well, but just look at gross grants from year to year.
The best we could do would probably, at this point, until we're retrospectively looking at the IIJA, would be to do a estimate in which we could be pretty confident in the, order of magnitude.
Is part of your intention of presenting it in this way today that this has implications for this coming budgetary cycle, that we are going to need more for additional local matches to potential grants? Does this have implications for the coming budget?
Or why did we have?
Yeah.
Well, it was requested. It was requested by the House Transportation Committee, and I think the idea was, what kind of progress have we made since the IIJA came into existence? And this kind of tally is to illustrate, what we've received from these grant programs since.
So we're struggling because we didn't have the context of the House deliberations of why this report was requested. So it's helpful. I guess we're probably engaging in that, trying to put some framework around.
I think the other idea around this discussion was to, in years past, I've come in and said, given you a spreadsheet that showed multiple years that said, this is the federal funding we're used to receiving, here's the federal funding we're planning to receive, here's kind of the state match implications. And we are we cannot have that discussion right now. But so I think we got, we wanted to offer this as a difference, yeah. We'll have that discussion
Oh,
in
it's
more depth.
illuminating. You're illuminated,
Later.
right?
Well, I'm interested in this Montpelier
Yeah,
grant for
you
fuel
are.
electric vehicles that
Oh, where are they?
yeah, they're
Maybe
hiding.
I
in
got
the
them
back.
over in the Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah, maybe Russ took them.
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's holding it.
We've got a pellet furnace attached to them, powering them.
Anything else before we go offline?
I'm good.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, Costa.
Thank you both.
Thank you.